everyone. It's Thursday, May 21st. It's our workshop, first of two workshops we have for our budget. All of council is present, and I will call this meeting to order. We'll start with public comments. And as we've been doing, y'all, you send them in electronically, and Kim Chapman, our town clerk, reads them with a clock, and she reads up to the 3-minute time frame. We have one public comment, and I think we realize we can read it in time and not put the clock up for this one. So Kim, you're up.
Okay, we've got one public comment. It's from Mike Raymond, 58 Ginkgo Lane in Bluffton. Honorable Mayor and council members, with 36 million Americans out of work, now is not the time for local governments to raise taxes or implement new fees. Now is the time to tighten the budget belt in solidarity and wait for better times. Let's let folks get back on their feet before mandating what they have to pay, that they have to pay more. That's it.
Okay. Any more public comment? Public comment is over. Moving on to workshop items. Can we take a little break maybe before the workshop starts? And I think we have one thing to do. If everyone could go off mic. And hold on. Start. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear friend. Happy birthday to you. Woo!
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Fred?
Nice surprise. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, I'll keep my background up for you for a few minutes. So.
All right.
Okay. Moving on to workshop items. General fund, stormwater, utility fund, and debt service. And I know you'll just blend right into all three of those. I tell you what, if there are questions, I'm going to try to put all of y'all up on my screen because we can really break in there. I can see all of you. If you'll just kind of raise your hand, if you have something, I'll get it where we can get questions and not too many people are talking at the same time. Go, Mark.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Council. My pleasure and honor to present to you the budget in our workshop this evening. I'll share my screen. Slideshow, play from start. There we go. All right. So as we work through the budget, some of these things you've seen at first reading. And so what I've done is you'll see a little bit of duplication from first reading. I'll jump over those items quickly. And then what I'll do is I'll pause more at the revenues and expenditures as really it relates to our three funds. You'll see, and again, as a reminder, I've taken a look at the ICMA 4 steps to success for budgeting during a crisis, and I encourage all of you to read these items. I think we're following the 4 steps, or at least the 3 steps thus far, very well in terms of forecasting, reducing our spending, finding new resources, reducing costs, as well as communicating and engaging with the public. You know, I never start off a bond or a budget conversation without reminding us that we are in excellent credit rating with both Moody's and Standard & Poor's. And a lot of that has to do with our tax base, our fiscal management, our fund balance, our robust financial position, and then as well as any debt and pension burden. As we set out to establish the budget, the thoughts that the department heads, and I know all of you that we've worked through, is what do we need to do to fund the deliverables in the strategic plan? And then how do we also continue to support the operations, the employee growth, as well at the very end of it all, definitely to build a Bluffton community. And we always use our budget as a catalyst for change. And so as we know, there's 4 funds. We're here tonight to talk about 3 of them: general fund, stormwater, and debt. And then this coming Tuesday is the CIP, Capital Improvements Program Fund. You'll see that our budget is a reduction of 8.3% overall from last year. Tonight, we're going to take a look at a general fund that comes to you $826,099 less than last year. A stormwater utility fund that's pretty much a break even. And then also debt service that shows a 436,000 in excess dollars, 13.6% change. And a lot of that has to do with transfers to capital projects. We know that the majority of our revenues are from property taxes and licensing and permits. And as you see those numbers as a percent of our budget, we see that property taxes are close to 30% of our budget, as well as licensing and permitting. And then transfers in special funds, A tax, H tax, and in this year, a new fund that I've proposed in the budget and spoke with you about recently, and that's the vehicle tax. That's a 17.4% of our budget. Overall, our revenues have been projected to decrease. And so when you look at these numbers, however you want to look at it, here or here, the strength of the numbers, the strength of the revenues has definitely diminished as a result of COVID, like everywhere. State A tax is down 25% projected. Local A tax ditto 25%. Business license, we're projecting somewhere between 8 and 10% of a decrease. Building permits down about 10, 12%. Municipal improvement development fees down 13%. Grants were down $2 million. Development agreement fees close to 30%, 37% decrease. And impact fees, which isn't a big number, but that's still down close to 60%. And so as we took a look at this budget, Chris Forster, our finance director, and myself have worked to provide very conservative revenue projections.
Lauren,
Yes.
Mark, can I ask a question? How do you track that with Chris? Because I see where you said it, you have notes with different categories, but these are kind of bulked into maybe one. But are y'all going to track that quarterly to let us know where we are? Or how will we get that information if we're as low or worse than or better than you thought?
Yes. So one thing that I've been preparing behind the scenes is to track that monthly and to show you the consolidated revenue. And so we have and it was provided in your budget books, consolidated revenue projections, and it literally lists every single source of revenue. We will track that monthly, Chris will, and he will provide that to you all in your monthly town council finance department updates. And so you'll just see how we're trending, where those numbers are, and we'll compare fiscal year 21, compare it back a couple years, probably go back 3 years on that. So we'll show you that. And some of the numbers are, depending on when property taxes are due. That's not going to change on us too soon, but we're really going to be able to track licensing and permitting and some of those other funding sources, A tax, H tax, and the like. We see that personnel and benefits is the majority of the budget. Consolidated, 39%. And so I'm pleased to present to you a balanced budget without any property tax millage increase. However, to be clear, I have proposed to reallocate millage from debt service to general fund, which helps with operating. We have a lean operating budget, and again, focused on your priorities. The only area that this budget expands that I've proposed is emergency management. So it relies upon funding for two new vehicles for police officers. One vehicle actually in stormwater management and inspections. And then also it relies upon or it asks for a new emergency management director. The two police officers are grant dependent, so I'm not asking for any general fund for those salaries. And again, this budget strongly invests in public infrastructure, which we can look at next week. As I mentioned in first reading, it allows for and proposes a stormwater plan review and inspection fee. So NPDES, you may see in your materials, the National Pollutant Discharge System, NPDES. We also have proposed a stormwater utility fee increase for utilization for MS4 implementation and watershed management plan, and ultimately to invest into capital projects for stormwater and water quality. And then the budget also proposes a $25 vehicle tag fee utilized for town roadways, public works, lighting, traffic enforcement. And I'll explain all three of those as I dive in. This budget also exceeds the essential levels of service of fund balance reserves that you can see on the screen for any reserve funds for emergency as well as for operations. The budget also proposed supports the strategic interagency partnerships. And so you can see the screen. Palmetto Breeze, the urban area local match request this year is for $77,000. And so that's gone up slightly. And what that does is it allows for some urban service route improvements, and that's a matching grant for LRTA, Low Country Regional Transportation Authority. And then you can see the screen. Solicitor Stone's office has asked for $85,000 towards their community prosecution team and our MOU with them. A public defender request for a little more than $45,000. And then you can see USCB Water Quality Lab. And I won't read all of these, but you can see them on the screen. This budget absolutely 100% funds those requests, including the ATAX requests below. The one new item you'll see this year, though, isn't a lot of dollars, but it's a $15,000 request, half from ATAX and half from HTAX transferred into the budget for Bluffton Bike Taxi to provide transportation options in our historic district at peak times. You'll also see, and what I thought I would show is because of the vehicle tag fee, I wanted to show the dollars that the town, or at least through the budget proposal, has programmed and planned and proposed as it relates to street improvements. Actually, I should put a P up there. Street improvements, public safety, and transportation. We've got a little more than $2 million of road projects, whether that's design, permitting, and or construction for next fiscal year. 452 in the general fund, and then a special revenue tag fee of $550,000 proposed, really to reduce the gap that I mentioned earlier with all of those reduced revenues, the business licensing, the permits, the municipal improvement development fee, development agreement fees, impact fees. So that special revenue vehicle tag was proposed really to accommodate that gap. One sec here. And so, what did I miss? Sorry, my computer's acting up on me, of course. So you'll see that, where are we?
The next, I think it's the next slide,
There
Mark.
we go. Sorry, my keyboard stopped working, but my mouse works. So you see how we propose to spend the money, and you see where the dollars are raised, and then you see where the dollars are proposed to be used. $2 million for CAP, $695 public safety, maintenance and lighting, as well as public transportation. And that public transportation is simply a matching grant request for us. So a little more than $3 million of asks. And so how does that spread out? I've done my best to try to explain in the presentation digitally how the dollar stretches. And so on $3 million of expenditure, the vehicle tag fee shows $550. We have $452 in general fund. And then we're also proposing $2 million of CIP. I want to be clear that the vehicle tag fee that I mentioned earlier is not for CIP. It's simply for operating. And the gap of $550 makes up for for the lost revenues projected based on COVID. And you can see that we're proposing to use that below. Specifically, where is the vehicle tag fee proposed to be used? I've been asked this question by council members. And I want to just share with you where those dollars are being proposed. You see that it's the public transportation grant match, that's $77,000. Roadway maintenance, in this budget, we have proposed a little more than $80,000 for roadway maintenance, the grass cutting, the ditch maintenance, the ditch clearing. And it's important to note, we maintain more roads than only the ones the town owns. We of course own and maintain Calhoun Street, Thomas Hayward, Pritchard Street just came into our network so we could put public sewer up Pritchard Street in the right of way. We own Hampton Parkway. We own many of the roads at Buckwalter Place, Commerce Park, and so on and so forth. We've also over time invested in others' roads. And I would say we invested in Mellenchamp and brought Dr. Mellenchamp into our network. And so while the road project was a capital project, we now have an operating expenditure that's needed to maintain Mellenchamp at the high quality that it is. So when I say road maintenance, I mean Dr. Mellenchamp. I also mean May River Road. So May River Road, while it's still in the state road network and the state road system, we maintain the improved portions of the streetscape as required and mandated by DOT. So what DOT first told us was, yeah, absolutely, we'll help you, we'll partner with you. Please improve the roadway if you'd like. We, of course, have to approve the design and functionality, but long-term, the town of Bluffton will maintain the street. And so I just want to make sure I'm clear on our responsibility of roadway maintenance. And it's not just historic district, it's beyond. Sidewalk maintenance, streetlight utilities. There's $113,000 of streetlight utility cost in the budget this year. And of course, the more streetlights we put in with capital projects in partnership with Dominion and others, the more that streetlight utility fee goes up, or the cost of that. And then public safety operations. I simply took a look at the shortfalls in the revenue projections and realized that we have close to $500,000 of patrol officers, radar equipment, and all kinds of other different operations. And so what this has simply done is trying to fill that gap and meet that need. As we dive into general fund a little bit more, you'll see that the millage remains the same in terms of 38.5 mils, but our mill value, which is very important in our budget, continues to rise. It's changed over time, and you can see it was back at, not that long ago, 2015, $146,000, and it's much higher at $250 today. And this is just a different look at the revenues. All of these I've listed and identified in the consolidated revenue forecast and overview. But you can see that general fund has limited funding sources. I would say that's one thing to take away from this. Property tax, license, and permitting makes up a big portion of our general fund. And so licensing and permitting, and grants for that matter, are really where I've shared with you all of those declines. And so in our licensing and permitting is where our budget is, just like everybody else, has hurt the most. And this is just a smaller look at those consolidated revenues. I don't necessarily need to repeat them unless you want me to dive in a little deeper. I showed this at first reading. It's interesting to take a look at. Our initial proposed revenues were about $2.8 million in excess of where we are. And to close the gap somewhat, I've proposed the new vehicle tag fee of $25, shifting debt service to general fund, and then using a little bit of equipment reserve, and then transferring some other funds out of stormwater, which are as a result of some new revenues proposed in stormwater into the general fund. So I've closed that $2.8 million gap but we've cut 1.9 million. And the way we've done that is I've proposed a budget that does not include any merit increases. It's frozen a couple of positions, and we're walking really slow to hire some others. It's frozen any in-state or out-of-state travel, and it's frozen all newer replacement vehicles, even for the PD that Chief Chapman tells me they're in dire need of several vehicles, but I froze that. With the exception of Stormwater, our inspectors, I have asked for a new vehicle in that department. You can see some revenue trends over time. Of course, property taxes stay strong. We're projecting a 95% collection rate, but you see that others have definitely declined. The other funds have definitely declined. The majority of general fund, so the expenditures I overviewed from property tax, licensing, and permitting, the majority of our operating, of course, is salary, benefits, and some operating, a little bit of capital outlay and some transfers to CIP. And you can see how those percentages are, this year compared to next. Salaries almost remain equal. What the jump in 1.8 is last year I brought some positions online in 6 months into the year. And so we've got to carry the whole year in 21 versus the half a year in 20, as well as the 3 positions, 2 grant funded and 1 emergency management director, general fund reliant on that. So where are the dollars in the departments? I think that this graph does this chart and look gives a real good look of where our departments are and where those funds are allocated. You can see that the police department is in engineering and growth management are the larger departments in the town, and of course carry with that the larger percentage of fund allocation. You can see that 139 employees in fiscal year 20, and the 3 positions I've mentioned to you would grow the FTEs by a few. That being the emergency management director, 2 traffic officers, and again freezing 2 positions, being 1 in historic preservation and 2 on really planning and engineering inspections. I mentioned eliminating salary adjustments, freezing positions. We're also proposing, just like past years, very, very much the same as past years, to allow our employees to cash out 25 hours of pay at Christmas time, right before Christmas, as long as they have a 40-hour balance in their PTO. The town of Bluffton proposing to cover the 1% and 5% employee benefit, the employee public benefit for retirement and health insurance. And then more and more what the budget really proposes. The one larger item here, and it's $100,000 differential from last year, is our new garbage contract. A ton of credit given to Felicia in finance and Brian in engineering for reworking the contract with waste management. What I anticipated to come in at a 1.5 factor for new garbage rates. Our contract's been in place for a lot of years. We are actually paying an extra $103,000 or so for the contract. I think waste management stepped up to the plate, and we definitely did the right thing for the town of Bluffton. But again, that's an added expenditure to the budget this year without any other projected revenue increase. And so in typical years, we could assume that cost, we could find that cost simply based upon the growth, new tax base, more permits, bigger numbers coming in. But with this year, that $103,000 was a much heavier lift to figure out than in past years. The budget also includes the reforestation plan that council has asked for in the strategic plan, as well as some other outsourced contracts for grants. And then all of these programs, LETC 43, our K9 drug task force, It also includes $150,000 for the comprehensive plan for year one. I believe that's going to be an 18 to 24-month plan in the town of Bluffton. And I've proposed $150,000 in the comp plan or in consulting services for our comprehensive plan. And then it of course supports the affordable housing, the community development plan, the affordable housing initiative, and it also adds a new dangerous tree removal program to that proposed. And then of course the beautification committee so that we can remain as a Tree City USA. There's a certain dollar amount we have to spend per person. And of course, as we grow, that number grows in our budget so that we can maintain our Tree City USA status. A little deeper look at the affordable housing work plan. This has been in place for many years, and what I've proposed this year is $190,000 base, $150,000 to home repair, and then these dollars, 15 for abatement, 5 for property cleanup, 9 for private road repair for emergency access, E911 addressing, and tree mitigation. Any unspent dollars carry forward. And so typically in general fund, if they're unspent, they simply go back to the general fund balance for prior year. But as you all know, you adopted a policy that transfers any unused dollars out of general fund, out of the operating account into the CIP account. So this year we anticipate that we would have spent the entire 150,000 base, or I should say 180,000 base, less $58,000. And I think that staff's been doing a great job, or I really commit that staff's doing a great job with Heather's leadership in the home repair program. But we've slowed down a little bit simply over the last little while with the COVID-19 pandemic. You see the dollars that we're proposing for beautification. It's $5,000 for plantings, 12 for special projects, general tree planting for $30. So yeah, the dollar amount is $2 per capita per year to maintain. Don Ryan Center. Excuse me. My computer has a mind of its own tonight. So the Don Ryan Center, we've proposed the same amount of dollars, and I've proposed the same amount of dollars in fiscal year 20 as I've proposed and you have approved in fiscal year 21. And you can see that over here. The green shows $405,120 of town revenues. The other areas are Don Ryan Center derived revenues, which our funding is 93% of their budget. And you can see on the right-hand side of the screen that personnel is the majority of the cost, but then, you know, all the things for overhead, meals, travel, lodging, which is only at a small amount, which covers any webinars and professional development for staff, but you can read through that. Utilities is a bigger number, $18,600 in the new hub. And then professional services, that's Mike Levine, our CEO, who's under contract rather than an FTE, all inclusive there with things. So the Don Ryan Center with that, as we know, it supports entrepreneurism, business incubation, co-working offerings. You've all discussed that and your expectations set as you adopted the small business resiliency plan last month. And then you also see that the Don Ryan Center is the town lead in any business attraction expansion, as well as any future investment in the oversight at Buckwalter Place Commerce Park. I don't necessarily need to get into this tonight, but I think it's important that it's in the presentation that you see the key performance indicators out of the Don Ryan Center over time. You can see that 92% of the DRC alumni is based in Beaufort County. 68% of their alumni is based in the town of Bluffton. And so I think that's just a good look to understand how your dollars are being translated into a return for the Don Ryan Center. And that is my overview of the general fund. I can pause for questions.
Just one quick, I had a note and I had put it down on another piece of paper because I know, just if I could go back, because I know we're on Facebook, some governments allow questions to come through Facebook and they're answered and we don't. We have our public comment kind of set up. I just want to make sure if anyone's on Facebook, because I saw last week after I looked at it, after it was over, there were comments and I don't want people to feel, I don't want them to get angry because no one's responding, but the way we do things, we are not pulling Facebook comments and answering them during council meetings. So for those of you looking, if you were on last week, just know we're not being rude. We're just not, none of us are really following Facebook. I'm sure some of us are on it right now, but they're not going to be answered during, it's not a public comment forum. So I meant to say that at the beginning. Anyway, council, I got you all up on the screen so I can see you. Are there, Mark, what do you want? Do you want questions on each one? I have a couple and I can wait or not. What would you rather see?
Mayor, I would rather get through it all because each account affects the other.
Okay. So if y'all are okay, I've got a few, just write your questions if you have your book or not. And then I didn't mean to interrupt you the last time. So let's get through it all and then go back. Are y'all okay with that?
Am I going too fast? You want me to go slower? Or am I good? Good pace? All right.
Okay, move on. I'm going to mute me. Go.
Stormwater. We know that stormwater accounts for and reports the financial resources for any stormwater related expenditures, and the revenue for the most part in our stormwater utility fund is our stormwater utility fee, $98, which was established in 2008. And so backing up a little bit and apologize for repeating myself, it is important to wrap our minds around that in February, shortly before the COVID outbreak, and in advance of any anticipation of any COVID impacts in our country, that the May River Watershed Action Plan Committee recommended that we change that $98 base rate to $150. And so as we started to look at the budget and I started to try to make sense of the revenues and expenditures and the baseline, I've realized that, and then in a lot of talking with town council, with all of you in our conversations leading up to first reading, I understood that there was some concerns with the $150 amount. And so what I've proposed in the budget this year is $115 rather than $150 stormwater utility fee per single family unit. And so the proposal would be is to accept the $115 fee, also implement the National Pollutant Discharge, the NPDES fee for stormwater plans and associated inspections, and then allow the finance director and our team to come to you to issue a $5 million bond for stormwater capital projects. You can see that the $98 to the $115 absolutely affects a property owner. It goes, if you take a look at any homes that are less than 2,500 square feet, the fee changes from $58.50 to $72.50. What else? Mobile homes would change from $47.44 to $60.60. And so you can see where we are in the region. Our $98 over here on the far right side of the screen has been in place for a while. Others are up to $150. Some are as low as 60, and then you have some in between. Beaufort County at 100 and City of Beaufort at 135. This is just a good look so you can see how it would affect your property tax bill. So these dollars would show up for payment on your property tax bill due January 15th in January of 21. The NPDES fee, we're not alone in asking for it. I would say we're alone in the sense that of all of these communities on the map, or on the chart, I should say, have all been charging that fee for some time, especially as they get into any NPDES programming, MS4, let alone trying to restore and preserve the May River the way we are. And so in essence, this is a growth related application helping pay for growth related issues over time. And so these fees would be for the time spent on plan review and inspections, as well as live in the stormwater account, utilized for ditch maintenance, waterway improvements, and any things like that. And you can see that the stormwater utility fee is somewhat simple in the sense that it doesn't have a lot of different sources of revenue, which is what affects us over time. And you can see in the fiscal year 20 budget, our recurring revenue of 1.3, almost $1.4 million relied upon $65,000 of grants and relied on $576,000 of fund balance for a total revenue of a little more than 2 million. This year, with the proposed fee change, as we think of bonding $5 million to build the sewer projects and invest much sooner than later, you see that the recurring fees, the recurring revenues jump 21.5%. So almost 1.4 to almost 1.7. Not a lot of dollars, but enough for us to start making sense of, especially when we calculate and add the NPDES fee to this. And you see that for the most part, we have stable revenues, but now we're not relying upon fund balance. You see that that's simply more of a sustainable approach and thinking about the long game rather than just relying upon one-time fees. It's simply diversifying our revenue base in stormwater. Where do the dollars go? Personnel, operating, capital outlay, transfers to CIP, and you can see those dollars there. And again, the jump here isn't new positions in personnel. It's simply that we had a position start 6 months into last year, and then in fiscal year 21, we're assuming the entire 12-month cost. And so you can see those dollars. In a bigger look, and I think it's important to understand this, so how does fiscal year 20 versus 21 affect the fund balance for stormwater? So as we really load up to think through a $5 million bond or some value of a bond agency is always going to take a look at a couple of things, really. You know, how do you operate, but then also what are your recurring revenues and do you have any fund balance? So we've strengthened our revenues. We've strengthened our recurring revenues, I should say. They won't necessarily rely upon the NPDES fee because that's permit dependent. That's if the economy is slow, that number is lower. But they could rely upon the recurring stormwater utility fees. And then we also see that in fiscal year 20, we dropped the fund balance by $600,000 simply building projects with it. And we've built some tremendous projects. We're a couple of years away from having 100% of Bluffton residents on public sewer, to your point, and the Watershed Action Plan Committee's point of establishing and focusing on that goal. You see that with the fee change, we are not diving into the fund balance whatsoever. And so with that being said, the funds support the May River Watershed Action Plan. The stormwater utility fee jumps from $98 to $115. That's a potential $256,000 of revenue. And then the NPDES fee based upon very conservative growth projections on development activity, we anticipate $365,000 approximately of revenue generation. 130,000 of those dollars is for ditch maintenance. And so we now have a full-time project manager who's working with DOT and Beaufort County as an example to improve some of the drainage on Boundary Street as well as on Buck Island Road. It rains a little bit and those ditches are flooding on Buck Island Road. And it is important to us. Our ditches are cleaned, but we have to make sure that we're working with DOT, Beaufort County, as well as any private residents. And so the program supports that more this year than last, simply because we now have that full-time employee and some dollars on the table to enhance our services. And then you can see this as well. Personnel, operating, and capital outlay, a little more than $1.1 million, including those the USCB contract and the water quantity model, as well as the vehicle. And the bigger chunk, the 722,000 and change, funds significant phases of projects in the historic district. And so you see these phases on the screen. These 6 phases provide public sewer to the historic district. And so Buck Island, Simmonsville, after phase 5 is complete, Goethe Road, complete. So really what's left is the historic district plus a couple of outlier projects or outlier parcels that I know our engineering department and GIS division and IT are putting together to truly understand any outlier public sewer deficiencies. But what you see are the asterisks on the page. And so with the bond, and as proposed, that bond would pay for, ultimately, phase 2 through 6 in early years, rather than continuing to build a project phase at a time. And so as proposed, the goal would be to bring you in August or September a first reading to authorize us to move forward with Franny Heiser to issue that bond on these projects. And so we're ready to fund them and build them if council has the appetite for the fee increase. Debt service, we know we have 2 sources of bonds. We have the GO bond, which is really the general obligation bond issued in 2010, but refinanced this year with $59,000 of net savings this year. But that ultimately funded the police station in 2010. And so you can see that the initial bond was 6.5 million. We still owe about, we still owe about 3.7 million. Principal and interest annually is $376,371. The TIF, which was issued in 05 and 06 for $14 million of projects, including Bluffton Parkway, Hampton Parkway, May River Road Streetscape Phase 1, Buck Island and Old Town Sewer projects, as well as the Old Town Master Plan. Those, still owed on the TIF is 5.1, almost $5.2 million. And you can see our principal and interest annually on that is $931,000. It's important to let you know that with the refi of the GO, it will expire in 2034, but the TIF will expire in 2026. And then you can see where the dollars are generated in debt service, mostly from the TIF property tax district, as well as other property tax millage assigned to it. You can see that the majority of our dollars are principal, interest, but mostly transfers out to capital projects, which has served us very, very well. And ultimately, what I want to point out to you is that the dollars utilizing that debt service have definitely helped us as we transfer TIF to CIP. We're proposing to transfer $2.3 million to CIP this year, still leaving us with a healthy fund balance of close to $3.8 million. In terms of fund balance, a total fund balance of $23,179,000 and change. We really have a fund balance. Most of the dollars, most of that 23 million is designated. It's designated in general fund per town policy and ordinance for emergency management and operations. There's also restricted uses, example, tree fund. It's also restricted uses in a fund balance for affordable housing before it transfers to CIP. But we do have 5.485 and change remaining undesignated fund balance. We also have stormwater fund balance, CIP fund balance, and the like. And so you can see that this, and what this does is that, of course, it earmarks dollars for emergencies and operations. And it's also specific to restricted uses, but it also serves as the foundation as we take a look at our bond capacity and the strength of our position as we get ready to refinance or issue any new bonds. And so the report that was provided from Moody's is our strong financial position. And of course, it's that we operate lean. It's of course that our millage is increasing and that we've managed our operations very well. And it also has a lot to do with this fund balance. And so I have always said, hats off to the administration before me for putting this in place, as well as our past finance director for having such a healthy proposal. And of course, all to you, council, for your commitment. Please make note, I've utilized fund balance in the past for capital projects and in time of need. And you can see that we're right back to the consolidated budget. We're here at the budget workshop, and I'm happy to answer or do my best to answer any questions.
Great, Mark. That hard, probably one of the hardest budgets you've put in place. Let's see, do you want to go through, just so we can keep this? I've got a few questions even on what you just last presented. Do you want to go, and let's just knock out the toughest one? Well, they're all related. Okay, questions. Let's go through, try to let everyone go through with a question or two, and we can always do a rerun. I can raise a hand if you have a question. Let's just make sure everyone gets the chance to ask a question first. Does anybody have anything on maybe the consolidated or overall? Mark can go through the slide. Larry.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just to start with, just a quick question to Mark. I was curious as to the $25 tag fee. How many tags do we have in the town of Bluffton? I mean, it's easy to tell how many homes and properties we have. I was just curious as to how you come, or how do we estimate that number?
I did just the simple math for me. Chris is on the call, he can confirm, but $550,000 divided by 25, 22,000.
Right.
Okay. I was just wondering how you did that. Or how'd you get a big number to divide the other 25 in? I guess that's what I'm asking.
I was going to ask that too. Did you come up with what you needed and divided it by 25? Or
No,
you have no idea of cars?
No, I took a look regionally and just simply didn't want to overcharge in the region, and knew that Hilton Head Island has been charging $25. And I know that some other communities in our region have at least explored the $25 fee.
Mark, I'm going to try to help because I understand Larry's question, but I don't think that was it. how did y'all calculate the number of cars that we have in our town limits to equate to that number that you're getting at?
The county provides a list of vehicles within town limits.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Okay.
And I was just curious about that. I'm not against the proposal or in any way. I was just curious to that. If I have one more question, do I finish it now?
Sure, finish going and ask one or two questions, and we'll rush through it. We'll go through because others may have questions off of someone after you.
Okay, just with this new stormwater fund, which I totally support, we worked very hard for 2 or 3 years to try to figure out how to come up with funding to do some of these sewer projects. And the main goal is protecting the river and make sure that we don't have flooding and flooded streets and dangerous situations. Even mosquitoes, we'll never get them all. But it's my understanding that this new fee, if it's approved, will apply to all structures, new and old, even ones that are under development agreements at this time, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's all. I was just looking at it and we talk about 98. I guess 98 was the average is what, but a regular single family home was, under 2,500 square feet was paying $58.50, and their bill is going to go up to 72, which is $14 more. So this increase is $14, $13, as it gets bigger. And some of the commercial properties, it increases at a little higher rate. But I can only say that we need this funding to do what we have been working for and on fighting for, as far as I'm concerned, to eliminate some of this degradation of the river. So that's all I have.
Okay, let's see. I lost all my list. I lost my guys all of a sudden. Brian but let's see. Anybody with a question? I see Fred. I don't see Dan at his desk. Bridget, yeah, I can ask a question do you have a question, Fred or Bridget?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
The $5 million bond for Stormwater Fund, is that going to be programmed the same as the stormwater utility fees for expenditures?
Not sure I understand, Fred, what you're asking.
We're going to get a bond for $5 million, is what you showed earlier.
Yes. So it will be programmed into the stormwater utility fee fund for debt service, really into debt service with a transfer from stormwater.
So we're going to use $5 million plus what would be the $115 stormwater utility fees to service the same needs for stormwater utilities, right?
Well, yes. What we're going to do is utilize some additional revenues, and we'll utilize those to pay the debt service on the bond. And so we'll pay the yearly or the monthly and yearly principal and interest on that bond. And so we don't necessarily need to come up with that full $5 million immediately. We simply are increasing the revenue slightly, right? We're proposing to increase revenues total $297,000 in the town. That additional will pay the debt service. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. I would say without it, we don't have the dollars to pay the debt service.
And your bond is for the projects you permit that you asterisked on one of these pages that are some of others that you're doing, I'm guessing. That.
Yes.
Bridget, do you have anything at the moment?
Yeah, more so a concern and not necessarily a question. I was going to say, and thank you, Mark, for a lot of what you presented in the budget, specifically addressing like how the increase of the stormwater fees are going to go towards projects and areas like Buck Island, which is seeing a huge amount of flooding, like you said, in the least amount of rain. So that was great. But I wanted to mention, like, as we're seeing the increases or even imposing the increases on residents, I know there have been some concerns from residents on seeing an increase in fees, but kind of a diminishing of some public services, like how we once used to be able to do like debris pickup. I know some residents have also mentioned the like how the grass that was once cut, like in certain areas of town of Bluffton properties, they have not seen in their area, even though they're in the town. So it's just more so a concern of, I don't want anyone to think that they're being ignored with those concerns, but yet we're coming to them on, you know, fee increases. I just want to make sure that we address things like that. And looking at the 2020 economic factors, that chart that you had up that showed like the household income and median home value.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. So in looking at that one, I find it interesting to the points we've been talking about. So we look at like our economic drivers, where a huge part of our workforce is coming from, and they're in accommodation and food and retail. And in both of those industries, those workers are majorly hourly, and we go over to the AMI and it's way above what they would afford. So that's why, like, when we talk about affordable housing, why it's important to be able to distinguish. There's a difference in affordability to those who really need it and those who actually qualify for that. So I want us, like, as we're going through this at some point, to make sure that the proposals we're coming up with, we're going to be able to address and provide relief to those residents.
Okay.
Got it. I'm going to ask a few. I don't see Dan here. So,
Can you hear me, Mayor?
Um,
Can you hear me?
oh, I was looking at you. Yes, I can hear you. Dan, do you have questions? You want me to ask a question? Are you away at the moment, or did you?
No, I can't get everybody on my screen again. I don't know why.
Oh, well, you're.
I see you.
I see a piece of paper on your laptop. So that's why I didn't know if you stepped away or not.
I can
No,
help.
Okay,
You
Mark,
are-
help.
Dan, are you on your iPad?
Yes.
You reversed your screen. So bottom right or top right, little circle arrow to turn you around.
There you are, Dan.
Okay. Sorry.
No,
Sorry.
it flipped, and I thought maybe you stepped away for a phone call or something, and it showed your.
No.
Okay, I'm sorry. So Dan has been here. Do you have questions, Dan?
Yes, I have some comments. I did speak with Mark yesterday on some of this topic, but I'm going to run through it and throw it out there for ideas for the group. But the comments I'm about to make is regarding fund balance. I, for one, would like to, before we go out to bond or other things, we don't know where all this is headed. We don't know where we'll be 6 months to a year from now. So I would rather take a little bit slower approach, but still do the funding aspects as the town manager has presented. Now, that being said, the national pollution funding is through new construction. So I'm not worried about that one per se. The vehicle tag and the stormwater fees, utility fees, are $800,000 between the two of them. Technically, even though they're fees, that's about a 3.2 mil increase. What I would like to propose is we have 5 million, as Mark said, we have almost 5.5 million in fund balance unrestricted, and we have 4.8 million in fund balance, which is 25% of the general expenditures, which used to be 15% about 2 or 3 years ago. And we as a council raised that number to 25% from 15. So that's an arbitrary number. That number can be lowered. That number could remain the same. Point being is that's $10.3 million that can be utilized that I see and fund balance. Now,
Dan,
if you take,
Dan, now he has the screen up, because I couldn't find it on my book. Go back to what you were saying, the thing that was arbitrarily passed, but it's an ordinance, so it is what it is. But show me where you're talking so I can follow you.
I'm using my notes.
I know, but Mark's screen's up for all of us to see, as well as who's on Facebook.
I'll show you, Dan. Mayor and council, it's under general fund 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down, undesignated fund balance. And that's the 25% of budgeted revenues. And so that's per your ordinance that you adopted in the budget a couple of years ago, where we had a surplus of undesignated fund balance, really this remaining undesignated, we only had a 25% expectation to maintain that fund balance for operations. Of course, you have the 15 for emergency. What Councilman Wood is referring to is that 25 a couple of years ago was at 15, and so we also have the remaining undesignated with no strings, as you can see, at almost 5.5 million and 4.8 million. Dan, did I capture that, sir?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Mark.
Thank you. I wasn't following where you were, and I don't have your notes. Okay, I have a
All
thought.
right, so if I continue on, and again, I think this is something I think Mark needs more time to digest it from when we spoke yesterday and tonight, and then maybe some way package it up and throw it back at the rest of council to see what's practical and isn't. But if you took the 4.8 million that he just referenced at the 25%, say that you drop that from 25 back to 15, that would yield you $481,000 and 175. That's 10%. If you took the 5,485,000 that's unrestricted, and you took $318,000 from it, 318,825, you pretty much have funded the vehicle tag and the stormwater utility fee without a continuing fee. Now, I'm proposing this only for 1 year. The other thing I want to talk about is when you look at the projects for the stormwater bond funds, that came out to $708,000. So if we bonded out the projects that we're looking to build this year is $708,000. One question I also had, Mark, was in our proposed budget, we've always had money set aside for land acquisition. And the number in there now is 993,000.3. So I guess what I'm trying to get at, I personally not a fan of the tag fee, only based on timing of the economy. I would like to go a little slower and fund some of these things out of funding that we already have. And one other thing, just as a point of interest that the town manager touched on, the Tif funding that comes in this year's budget is $3.6 million. The 2.3 million of that will actually be moved over to CIP use, which is fine, of course. What I'm trying to get at, and he just pointed out, that's going to continue through 2026. That revenue stream is coming in at almost 3 times the amount of money that we actually utilize from it to pay our bond debt. So I think there's a lot of things in play with fund balance, and I know there's other fund balance numbers out there that could be revisited. But anyway, I hope everybody understands what I'm saying. I think we can get through this year without fee increases.
Thank you, Dan. A couple of questions from me, just a response really to one of yours, Dan, which I think just being here so long maybe has caused it. Municipal association, everyone tells towns they need a year's worth of reserve fund if a hurricane were to hit. And that is why we increased that several years ago to try to get to that point. Now, no one really ever has a year's worth, but I think we all remember Matthew, which was a blink on the radar for us. I will tell you, I'm a big proponent for fund balance, and I don't want to see us in bankrupt state. It's not an if, it's when we get a big storm. So that is why that went to 25, and I'm not going to vote to lower that because
Well,
I
let me
pushed it.
say,
But I got questions. I just want to answer, and we can go back. But let me just ask a few questions of Mark so I can have my turn. Mark, I don't understand a dangerous tree removal program. That's a question. I just don't know what it is. What's a dangerous tree removal program? And maybe ask afterwards. I know you're listening. You can write it down. My other thoughts were the fee. You know, if we do this fee, do we see a list of projects year to year, and will we do that during strategic plan, or would we give communities? And I'll speak to what Bridget spoke about. A resident at Drayson Circle is very frustrated, and you and Brian and I walked with several residents after Matthew on the drainage, and a lot of that is a county issue. And we know we're doing projects that are county responsibilities. I don't want to lose them, because I remember going out there, and Brian was, I'm sure it's fresh on both of y'all's minds. So how do we figure that? You've got to focus this year. So that's Buckwalter on McCracken, it's Buck Island Road and Drayson Circle. I just don't want to miss out on. And then we always have trash and recycling, which we have never, ever, ever charged a resident a penny for. So when we pulled debris, it was to keep from charging residents for trash and recycling. And at that point, I think it was about an $800,000 general fund item. I'm throwing out there, everyone else charges for it, and not very many people get free trash and recycling. And I don't like to be the mean ogre on it all, but the river is gonna not stop needing help because of a pandemic. And we've got to be proactive, I think, on all of this. So anyway, that's just my thought, my comment back to you, Dan, on the year's worth of emergency funds. It's just wanted y'all to relay that. And Mark, you can answer all of our questions, or we can keep asking questions. What do you want to do?
yeah, Mayor, I'd like to ask one more thing.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait, real quick. Mark, do you want to answer the other council, everyone's questions, or do you want to hear us talk and you take notes? Because Dan wants to say one more thing too.
Well, it's hard to take notes as fast as you talk. I don't want to miss anything. So I don't mind pausing for each one of you and answering your questions, and then continuing. It might be a little easier. And then collective questions at the end. I keep going.
Well, I think you answered, Larry asked a question, you answered it. Bridget made a statement. I don't know if it was a question. Fred, did you get your question answered? And
I did.
and Dan.
So there's gonna be some ongoing discussion, but I'm ready to move on. Go ahead.
Okay, Dan, then throw a question, and then Mark can answer.
Yes, I just wanted to come back. I wanted to say again, and again, you know, this is thinking different, and it may not be what everybody wants to do, but we do have 15% of the fund balance set aside for emergency, as you know. And
Not enough.
pardon me?
It's not enough. But you're right.
I'm not saying that it isn't, but there is 15% set aside there. The numbers that I threw out just to cover the vehicle tag and the stormwater utility fee for 1 year would still leave over $9 million out of those two funds. And again, I come back and I ask the question, and on the just under $1 million we have budgeted for land acquisition. I don't believe that money's restricted right now.
Correct. Correct.
Mark, do you want to answer some questions?
Yes, I'll do my.
Dan, and I didn't mean, I should have let you answer Dan's first. I just wanted to get my questions into you.
Okay. Well, I'll do my best to go back. Councilwoman Fraser makes some great points that I truly understand. debris removal, cutting grass. I would say that we've expanded cutting grass where we have to and where we should. I think in the past, operationally, we would pick up debris and we would cut grass. But, you know, I think over time, the DOT, Beaufort County, the town of Bluffton have become a little more refined in whose roads are whose and who's cutting what grass. And so what we've really focused on is the expectation of maintaining our roadways first, but then also how does it impact a neighborhood? And so that I know that our public works team often is out mowing, blowing, and doing what they do on Hampton Parkway, on the historic district streets that we own now, including Pritchard. And I know that they also venture into some other areas within DOT right-of-way and Beaufort County right-of-way, because we all don't define regular maintenance the same. It's just the DOT isn't here trying to maintain right-of-way weekly. And so I think as we grow, the balance is about expectations versus operational availability. Mayor Council, I hear you when you say to highly prioritize the stormwater maintenance and sewer projects. Drayson Circle to this day, there's not any time that I drive by it, and as we think about, you know, ditch maintenance, that I don't think about going there and seeing their flood in, you know, in person shortly after a hurricane. Some of those ditches are not our property. Some of those ditches are Beaufort County. Some of those ditches are private. Brian's on the call tonight. I don't necessarily need to put him on the spot, but I can speak for him and his team that they are highly prioritizing stormwater. In the past, they don't have a lot of dollars to go out and do things outside of the basics. The funds are limited. We have a great public works crew, but sometimes there's work that we can't figure out ourselves, especially if it's in a DOT right of way, a county right of way, let alone on private property. We are working on Buck Island Simmonsville Road. I know they went out there and walked Mr. Brown's property recently. Kim Jones reported that to me, and they have a strategy in place, big picture, for all different ditch systems, all leading to the May River as well as other watersheds. Brian, maybe with a nod of your head, you can let everybody know tonight how important that is to you and me and Kim Jones and your team. Couple thumbs.
Yes, very, very much so. So Drayson Circle, we've met with the county. They have the easement that goes around the backside of Drayson Circle. It's a Beaufort County easement. They have cleaned that out, I think, about a month or so ago. Drayson Circle itself is a DOT road. So all the ditches, all the pipes, all the culverts are DOT. The only thing that the town needs to do are 2 easements along 2 private properties that go to that county channel along the outside of the property. We've talked to both of them, both of the residents. They don't want to give us the easement. So we would either have to condemn the easement in order to drain the DOT right of way to the county drainage, or there's nothing else we could do. So that no one wants to give us an easement. So it's kind of like a catch-22. You know, you either let it flood or we have to condemn it.
Brian, can you not reach out to their POA, or maybe we could do a community meeting? I don't want to put property owner against property owner. I mean, should we condemn it? I mean, it seems to be that was 17, so this is 3 years and we've been working hard on it, but I don't think the neighborhood realizes how hard you're working on it. And maybe they do tonight. There was a lady that lived there that emailed all of us, and I responded today. I felt, I just kind of gave her the facts, but I do feel for them.
Yeah, no, we
could do that, Brian. We could meet with the POA and have a community
POA, but ultimately it comes down to the property owner if they want to give us the easement or if we want to condemn it. But the last time we reached out, they did not want to give us an easement.
Could you
but
tell them that could you tell them, at least with the PO, that we are condemning it for the good of all of that neighborhood?
Yes.
We've condemned
Yes,
other
we
things.
could, but we'll bring that back to you, of course, because we need council's approval to condemn that. So.
And what's great, Brian, thank you. That helps. Mayor, Council, what's great is the employee, our great project manager that we just hired was in last year's budget, and we hired him mid-year this year. He actually came on board in March. So know that that's a high priority. I'm glad that Brian knows the details at that level, in the weeds, so to speak. And we will be bringing you a lot of these types of projects and a lot of these types of problems to help us solve along the way. So stay tuned.
Mark, can I jump in real quick, and it might help? Because Dan didn't, and I think council needs to agree on it. With the land acquisition, we used it or lost it. And I know that lose is not a word, but we used it or we lost it. Is council have an appetite to get rid of that this year and put that towards your projects? Maybe you could just jump to that, because that covers your fees. Are y'all willing not to call Mark and say, I got this piece of land for a park here or there, and he's going to have to say there's no money because we put it toward fees that, but jump in. It's just a thought I had.
And because we have 4 different funds, that's what makes this chess move a little more complicated. That would be a great solution. Land acquisition dollars, they grow every year. Council passed a policy, was it last year or the year before, that if they're not used, 2 years ago, if they're not used, they continue. Is in the remaining undesignated fund balance, or perhaps in CIP, or perhaps an A tax, or perhaps an H tax, depending on the property, really has a big difference on source of money. If you froze land acquisition as an example and transferred those dollars simply live in fund balance. It's not operating money. The vehicle tag fee is true operating dollars. It's for maintenance, it's for utilities, it's for people, it's for those types of things, really as an offset, not a one-time use. So it doesn't solve that. And I've thought through this budget, 300 different ways. There's a few ways to solve the gap in general fund. There's furloughs and layoffs. And so to solve the layoff or the furlough gap of more than $500,000, that's about 7 layoffs or 23 plus days of furloughs. And so as we know that it's our time to support the community, I didn't bring a budget forward proposing those furloughs or layoffs. Another way is, per what Councilman Wood proposed, is a one-time use, or at least the expectation of a one-time use for operating on fund balance. I'm not wired to bring that to you. In the past, you have all said, don't use fund balance for operating. I'm just not wired, and I don't know that that's a good solution on a these are uncertain times though. So these are different times. In the past, I would never bring that to you. I'm open, I'm listening. Councilman Wood, please know that. Another way to get there is increase your revenue. And then a separate way to get there, so the fourth way to get there, is cut more from the budget. And cutting more from the budget, I really have run out of places to cut beyond the $2 million of operating without cutting people. So do we cut partnerships? Do we cut, agency requests, interagency fund transfer requests? And so the proposal was the $25 fee, similar to Hilton Head, to make that difference up. I've got a lot to think about, and I have some more questions to ask. Councilwoman Frazier asked about housing affordability. We hear you. Those affordable housing dollars are in a CIP account for true affordable housing. Nobody says it louder than the 2 council members that are on the Affordable Housing Committee, definitely Chairman and Councilman Hamilton, as well as committee member and Councilman Wood. We are close, very close. Heather's office, Growth Management, is very close to bringing you all in June a proposal for the town of Bluffton to partner to build more than 75 units of affordable housing. I think it's going to be a little more than that, but I don't want anybody writing notes on my number, so I'll say 75 and know that I'm good there. Mayor Sulka, you asked about dangerous tree removal. In my budget discussions, as I was going over the budget with council, it was asked that could we add some dollars to the general fund and into the Affordable Housing Committee account, not to take away from the current base of 180, but to add to it, so that if there are tree limbs, and those tree limbs, you know, folks that can't afford to fix the roof might most likely can't afford to cut the tree limbs that might fall and hit their roof. And so if we're having a comprehensive program, let's take care of the whole property in terms of safe and dry. And so I think that $10,000 works.
You answered it. I didn't realize that, Mark. I thought it was an overall program, and it's so many pages. I missed it. I'm sorry.
Yes. That's okay. That's the explanation. You asked about waste management. That's a differential. That's a $1.237 million, $1.237 million this year, 1.131 last year. That's $103,000 differential in the waste management contract going into general fund. So a little less than $500,000. I think I answered the other questions in terms of land acquisition. Councilman Wood, I haven't answered your question yet. You asked, and you know, strategically, how do we make it all work in term, you know, from debt service? You know, we know that TIF is in excess in terms of transfers out. Definitely our revenues are greatly in excess of our expenditures, with the exception of the TIF transfer. So when you look at $3 million of debt service, 2.4 coming out of the TIF, our TIF district, you know, the rest is just a small millage, 380, and then the municipal improvement development fees of 262. Well, we only have expenditures of a little more than $1 million, with $3 million of so we've transferred that out. Now, does that make sense to utilize that TIF transfer for stormwater projects? It does. It absolutely does. The TIF expires in 2026. Not that far from now. It used to seem like it was, but as you'll see on Tuesday night, the TIF dollars are for a lot of other programmed projects. And so when the bond authority looks at TIF, they're going to look at a recurring source of revenue, and they're going to look at some other things. You know, could I figure out stormwater using TIF? Yes, but I have to most likely take a lot of the projects that are programmed off the table, including, you know, and I don't know exactly, I'll have to look at the fund source, you know, Calhoun Street, and other projects. I'm sure, you know, if I asked Chris or Brian right now, they can answer all those questions. Perhaps we could take a closer look at it during CIP and make some decisions. But I think that there are some important projects that are currently relying upon our TIF, especially this year, $2.323 million into CAP projects. And those projects are already live. The only new project we have is Boundary Street, and that's simply the design. And so does that make sense? Absolutely, but we already have live projects that we'd have to stop. You know, I'm not saying every project's under construction, but a lot of them are designed, moving into permitting and getting ready for construction, as I pointed out in the first reading. So I would like for you all tonight to let me know what direction you want me to go in. I would say that the latest I could wait is after CIP on Tuesday. I'll definitely do some homework I'll definitely point out to you what projects are TIF dependent. And if you wanted to build the stormwater projects instead of, we could make some adjustments. But again, that wasn't my recommendation to you all since, early April.
Keep that screen up right now. That might be helpful. Is there maybe go through, do you need a heads up, nods up, thumbs down on where we are? Because I know we don't vote on this, but this was created from a lot of one-on-ones, and we had our first reading, and now you've got a little more information because of the crazy world we're in.
Yes.
I am fine with your budget. I think if we have a remaining undesignated fund balance, there needs to be a workshop in the public. Okay, should we take 10% of that every year to go to somewhere? I mean, I think that's a longer discussion of taking from maybe we need to designate some of that somewhere. I don't know. I want to go. I'm sorry, I'm done. I like what you presented, Mark.
Yeah, I would interject and say the same thing. I'm in agreement with the budget as is. Just as I mentioned with the concern, as long as our focus on those increases go towards things ultimately that are going to benefit those who might be most impacted by it, and doesn't get lost in like personnel or plan reviews. But I'm in agreement with your budget, Mark. So good job on that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mike, if I could say something, Mayor.
You're up, Larry.
Thank you. I just wanted to express my concern about, that almost $1,900,000, whatever we have in reserve for property acquisition. I see that as really, really important, as we talk about trying to decrease density in critical areas, or possibly buy the density. That money, to me, we need to be able to jump on something if the opportunity arises, whether it be a critical place, like out at the Circle where we got that barn property, or the Martin Family Park property, or the Wright family property. We need to have that reserve so that if the opportunity comes up and we can prevent or buy something to build a park or something for the people of Bluffton. I always believe we should have some amount of money ready to pounce on an opportunity that comes up. And who knows, with this year and the economy, what it's going to do and all like that, we may actually see an opportunity to help our town in the future.
Yeah,
I agree, Larry.
I agree. I'm sorry, Bridget.
No, saying the same thing. I agree. That's a good point.
I just threw it out there because it was a number, but the reason we made it carry over was because of that reason. There was a year we didn't use it, but the next year we needed it, and we realized it was lose it or use it. So I'm looking at everything, trying to think where we can help them if there was a majority that wanted him to change it. So,
Mayor, may I speak?
yes, Dan, you're up.
Thank you. First of all, Larry, I agree with everything that you said. And you may recall that when I first got on council, I asked for a line item for land acquisition, strategic land acquisition. So I've always been a believer in it, and I don't diminish that. The reason I brought up everything I brought up tonight on fund balance, I'm just trying to find a way when we're in the middle of an economic downturn to make sure we've looked at every angle to not impose additional costs upon our citizens. And that's all I'm trying to throw out as ideas tonight. And regarding the fund balance, again, the 10.3 million that we know is unrestricted, I don't even know what a town of our size with a budget of our size, what is a normal carryover for a fund balance? Is it too little? Is it just right? Is it too high? I don't know what the standard is for the standard recommendation. These are things that I would like to know more about. And regarding the stormwater utility fee, again, everything I've tried to throw out tonight was a 1 year, let's get through this and see where we stand at the end of a year idea. But I certainly know that the citizens of Bluffton have encouraged us to maintain our water quality as long as I've lived here and been on council. So I get that. I support that. I'm not against anything. I'm not a big proponent of the vehicle tag fee because again, those are like meal increases. I know, but we're doing the best we can.
Great. Well, I think
Thank you.
Chris probably could get us the government. Wasn't there a finance association where you can get us what's a recommendation? I just know through municipal association what they've told me, but perhaps we can get Chris to do a little research on what we need in our part of the world, because we are on the coast, which is far different from, well, not Seneca anymore because they just had a tornado. So Fred, anything on this? You're the only one that hasn't said anything.
Yeah, probably because y'all said too much.
Sorry. We want to stay here till 9 o'clock because I'm starving.
But you know, I'm very impressed on all the discussion and all the input the council has tonight, and I also understand, like you, Lisa, we've been doing this a long time, so we understand that listening to the concerns of our residents is where our heart belongs. So anytime someone comes to us with a concern or a question or maybe even an opposition, I really admire the way you guys take that to heart and seriously consider and try to figure it out. Now, with all the discussion that we had tonight, I think we came up with a very clear understanding that in these times of downfall because of the virus, Mark and Chris and staff has done a remarkable job trying to put a budget together that we can survive in this coming year. So even though I'm commending you, I'm also saying drop the $25 tag fee to $15 and let's get through this year. Thank you.
Got it. Okay, anybody else? Mark, you've heard thoughts all across the board, and I don't know what you need from us. Do you need anything else from us? This is a workshop.
This is a workshop. Please know I heard you all loud and clear. I continue to move forward with an open mind. I'm curious where your thoughts are with Fred's proposal of 25 to 15, and then I make up the difference in some other areas and bring that back. Would there be any objection to that if I made it work? Or Fred, was that a recommendation you want me to strongly consider, or just a statement?
No, just a recommendation that I want you to try to consider. If it can't work, Mark, you have my blessing.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So you have several thoughts of recommendations and several you got it. Is that all you need?
Yes, ma'am.
You're our CEO. You need to tell us
Yeah, I know.
what's best. Or you're the captain, as Larry says.
Larry, I like captain, and I do appreciate the opportunity. So the next time we get together is Tuesday, May 26th, for the town council budget workshop for CIP. At that time, I'll lay out the 5-year CIP, and then really drill down into the fiscal year 21 projects and explain to you how they'll all be funded. In that discussion will be use of TIF dollars, land acquisition, priorities and whatnot. So I don't have anything else for this evening. I've taken some great notes. I've heard and appreciate your comments. Please give me a call if something comes up and you have some more questions between now and Tuesday. You'll see that June 9th, not that long from now, but June 9th at the town council meeting, regular scheduled town council meeting in June, is the second and final reading and public hearing on the budget. Shortly thereafter, I'll bring to you the strategic plan for fiscal year 21 and 22 and simply align it with whatever dollars in the budget get adopted. So thank you.
Great. And then on the 11th, we have a workshop that I think y'all will get notified on if you already haven't been. Okay.
Yes.
This is great. We've had some, I'm sure, some great support on Facebook. Thank you for everything. Anybody else have anything? Then
Yeah, I would
let's go.
wanted to say, if everyone could send a prayer for the Hilton Head Island Middle School Stingray family. That was my student who was killed from the stingray bite. So that was a very hard loss to all of us.
Not a good, God doesn't have a day off during a pandemic, does he?
No.
I'm sorry about that. Memorial Day is Monday. We are doing, Fred and I, on behalf of all of council, are going to meet tomorrow and do a little quick video just talking about how proud council is of Memorial Day. And I'm sure Lindsay and Debbie are going to do some crazy splash on Memorial Day. Y'all be safe. Hand hygiene, that's the word of the day. If you touch something, wash your hands and wear masks. So peace out.